Want to make a podcast? Spotify's got a platform that lets you make one super easily, then distribute it everywhere and earn money, all in one place for free. It's called Spotify for Podcasters, and here's how it works. Spotify for Podcasters lets you record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer, so no matter what your setup is like, you can start creating today. Then you can distribute your podcast to Spotify and everywhere else podcasts are heard. Video podcasts are also available on Spotify. With Spotify for Podcasters, you can earn money in a variety of ways, including ads and podcast subscriptions. And best of all, it's totally free with no catch. Ever since we discovered Spotify for Podcasters, we have had so much fun trying out all of the features like Q&As and polls that let us be really creative and engage with our audience. I highly recommend you give it a try. Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to www.spotify.com/podcasters to get started. Welcome to episode 71 of Podcast Royal, where we break down the last 6 days of the UK's national mourning period, concluding with the powerful funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. So, Rachel, what were your initial impressions of the funeral?
I'm a little speechless. It's a wow factor. You think that this has been in some form or fashion in motion for 60 years. And it felt like that. It's so steeped in tradition and pomp and ceremony and history and meaning. And there's so much thoughtfulness and just so much dignity. And I thought it was a very fitting farewell to a very deserving woman. And I know we'll talk more about the ins and outs and the particulars in a minute, but I was honored to cover it with Marie Claire yesterday. And I was up at 3:30, and I'm not a morning person, and I just sprung out of bed and obviously not excited. I mean, who is ever excited for a funeral? But I was ready to do this, and it did not disappoint. What about you?
Yeah, very similar to your takeaways. For me, there was just so much to take in at this event. It was really beautiful and it was really impactful. To your point, knowing that it's been in planning for decades, and then we got to see it all come together. And we know that Her Majesty had a hand in every detail that took place. And when I think about the history and the tradition that we all witnessed, I mean, it was just really incredible. And then to top it off, there was a lot of personal touches kind of weaved in throughout the day.
Mhm.
You mentioned you were reporting for Marie Claire. I actually got to go back on Cheddar News Monday morning immediately following the funeral, to discuss the event live. And I mentioned how when I was on that segment, most of us were not born before she took the throne, and we've never known a time that she wasn't queen. So, I think her reign will be remembered and talked about for years to come. So to see that, funeral was just a reminder of kind of where we are today and what's changing and what's to come. And I also couldn't help but think about the family. While this is a very public event, this was the funeral of a mother and a grandmother and a great grandmother who was so deeply loved. And it was just, it was just really incredible to see. One other thing that really struck me was the music. I
Yeah.
felt like it was louder than ever that day. We just got to hear so much of song selections that she probably chose herself. And I think if she were watching, she would have been very pleased with how everything took place.
Well, I think she was watching. I hope she was watching from very a very good spot up above. I really do. And you talk about that's a great point you make about how this is obviously a funeral for a monarch, for a sovereign, for a queen, but it's also a funeral of a mother and a grandmother and a great grandmother. And I mean, I'll never be able to unsee that photo of Charlotte, just crying. And that's her great grandmother. And she's the royal family is the royal family, but at the end of the day, they're just a family. And that's her great grandmother. And I thought it was spectacular. And again, we're going to get into the particulars of everything in a second, but I thought she would be pleased. And I hope she somehow was able to see it play out. But we are going to make this again like the last episode. We didn't know last episode if we were going to come back or if we were going to wait another week and then come back. We usually do a cadence of every other week, but we're back because it feels right. And it feels like we need to talk about this while it's still fresh. Again, as ever, we're recording on Tuesday night. So the funeral was just yesterday and it's still so raw and fresh in my mind. And I'm glad we're getting a chance to talk about it. So once again, we're not doing what we're into. We're not doing Jessica's fashion pick of the week or a lifestyle segment or an interview. It's just us again for the last time in the mourning period. And probably one of the last times, which this is strange to say, one of the last times that we will talk about Queen Elizabeth II at length like this. She's been such a part of our show, obviously, in the nearly 2 years we've been doing this. And this is kind of where the story ends. And her legacy will never end, but her life is over. And I think, when I saw her coffin be lowered into the vault yesterday, it's the end of an era. And so this is just, it's all still so raw and fresh. But we're going to do the royal rundown. We're going to pick up on last Wednesday, where we left off. And we're going to go through today. And on Wednesday, the 14th, there was a procession behind her coffin through London. When we last recorded, the coffin had just made it to Buckingham Palace and had been received by the family there. So Wednesday, the coffin processed through London to Westminster Hall. We saw William and Harry walking side by side. Camilla has a broken toe, by the way. Camilla is doing all of this on a broken toe. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and she's in a lot of pain. And so power to her for obviously she's been on her feet all for 10, 11 days, and greeting mourners and just being so stoic and there for her husband and there for her country. And so Camilla, Kate, and Meghan rode in cars on Wednesday. Kate and Meghan so the coffin processed through London and made it to Westminster Hall. There was about a 20-minute, really moving service there. And she, of course, lay in state at Westminster Hall for the next 4 days. And Kate and Meghan at the service could be seen getting visibly emotional. I think, it's not like oh, I gotcha, getting emotional moment, but I think I saw Harry getting emotional as well. Meghan did just one of the deepest curtsies, again, I've ever seen when she was leaving Westminster Hall. Meghan was wearing pearl and diamond drop earrings that the Queen gave her at their first outing together, their first joint engagement in 2018. She wore those throughout the week. And actually, all royal women, including even down to Charlotte and Louise, wore nods to the Queen through their jewelry. Of course, for the funeral, everyone is in black, right? But the women really let their love for the Queen speak through, I thought, in their jewelry choices. Kate wore a brooch of Her Majesty's on Wednesday. I would love to know what you thought of the jewelry choices, like even up to yesterday, when at the funeral, Kate was wearing a pearl choker that once belonged to the Queen. If it looks familiar, I wrote a story about this from Marie Claire. If it looks familiar, it's because she wore that exact same piece to Philip's funeral in April of 2021. We'll talk more about the specific jewelry from yesterday later, but I'm wondering your thoughts on how the royal women really showed their love for the Queen through their jewelry choices this week.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was extremely thoughtful in how it was all put together. It was, of course, we know their clothing and their jewelry is intentional, but even more so, this past week, as they've chosen pieces that belong to Her Majesty, and as a way to honor her. And you mentioned, the kids, Charlotte and Louise, both. Wearing nods to her as well. I saw that, and we'll talk about that. But I thought it was really beautiful. I did notice the choker that Kate wore. I recognized that from seeing her wear it last year, and also the three-strand pearls she wore at the reception, which I'm going to mention later on as well. All kind of, were pieces that I noticed.
Yeah. And so Wednesday was the procession and then the service. And then she began laying in state. And we'll talk about this, but there were just so many people, including David Beckham, so many people that came out to pay their respects, and very well deserved and fitting for a life of service.
So on Thursday, William and Catherine stepped out to greet mourners at Sandringham. I actually shared a photo of all the flowers left by the gates on our Instagram account. And I mean, I was just blown away by the amount of flowers and gifts that we've seen left for Her
Mhm.
Majesty and the family, for them to walk through and see this. So many special touches from people all over the world who have come to pay their respects. One story that really stood out to me that I caught was when they were in Sandringham, Kate saw an 8-year-old little girl in the crowd, and she was carrying flowers and a little stuffed animal corgi for the queen. And Kate went over and pulled her out of the crowd and walked with her to go lay them down. And Kate asked, where do you think we should lay these flowers? And the little girl, whose name actually was Elizabeth, selected a spot to leave them. And later on, I think it was her teacher or something said that she was just, overwhelmed by being selected by Kate to walk up there, that she was just overcome with tears as she talked about it later. And I saw that little video clip. And I just thought that was really sweet. Did you see that, Rachel?
I haven't. No, I've seen some snippets from different members of the family visiting with mourners, but I have not seen that one. I'll have to look it up.
So on Thursday, there were so many mourners in London to see the Queen. They actually temporarily closed the queue because it was at capacity. I know, people were waiting in line more than 12 or 13 hours, and the evening temperatures got down in the, I think, 30 and 40 degree Fahrenheit range. I think they had something like 500 portable toilets all along the queue for people to use. And I heard a lot of businesses in the area were staying open late, or even 24 hours for people to be able to come in and grab food. And William even said, the Queen would never believe how many were mourning for her. It was just really incredible to see. Didn't you think so, Rachel?
Oh yeah, I mean, just and if you know that if you and I were in London, we would have done the same thing. I mean, I would have done it too, because not only is it fitting to honor her this way, but it's also, I mean, you can't understate that this is a part of history,
Mhm.
and this is living history. I mean, we I don't know if the UK will ever see a monarch on the throne for 70 years again.
Right.
Certainly not in our lifetimes, again, barring catastrophe, but it's not only does she deserve every bit of it, but it's history, and those who were there. And I appreciate David Beckham, who of course could have skipped the line. He's David Beckham, but he said, "No, my father was a royalist. I have a deep respect for the royal family, and I want to stand here just like everyone else." And can you imagine being the person that's like behind David Beckham in line, like
Well, yeah, and I
casual?
was actually going to mention that. So he was, of course, he could have totally skipped the line, but he was there and he stood there for like 13 hours. And there were some reporters out who, of course, caught him and got him on camera. And he was, making friends in the line. He was answering questions by the reporters, and someone asked him, why did you join the queue? And he said, yeah, we all want to be here together. We all want to experience something where we celebrate the amazing life of our queen. And then he went on to say, we're all eating Pringles, we're eating sherbet lemons, sandwiches, and coffee. So yeah, I really liked seeing that. And I thought it was just just a really great way for him to show up and stand in line along with everyone else and experience that with the crowd.
Kind of what a cool bonding moment with your
Mhm.
fellow citizens, you know, I mean, like that's something, I mean, you can make a friend there, and 13 hours is a long time. I mean, sometimes I think 1 minute is a long time when I heat up my food in the microwave. 13 hours together. And that's just like, that's a really cool bonding experience as humanity. I was going to say as British people, but I know people were there from the States and all over the world. And
Mm.
especially for British people, it's just, that's a moment where everyone came together for one purpose. And of course, she lay in state for 4 days. And at one point, they had to say, please stop queuing. We're at capacity. We can't take on any more. I mean, what a powerful testimony of what she means to the UK and to this world. So Friday, so Charles and Camilla visited Wales, and like I said, Camilla is doing all of this on a broken toe, such strength. And that evening, Friday evening at 7:30 in the evening, her four children, Charles and Andrew, Edward, united again for a second vigil of the princes. So we talked about her. The first vigil of the princes for her in Edinburgh, and this time it was at Westminster Hall, and just a very powerful image of the four children, of course, Anne making history again as the only woman to do this, and just the powerful image of her four children standing around her coffin, protecting the coffin. And then the next day, on Saturday, the Queen's 8 grandchildren stood vigil at Westminster Hall. They all bowed their heads for 15 minutes. They clasped their arms and they stood around her coffin and paid their respects. And I have to say, so we don't see a lot of James Viscount Severn. He's only 14. He'll be 15 by the end of the year, but he's got that hair, you know, I mean, we in the South, I call it the Southern swoop, right? Like the hair that goes across the bangs or whatever. And he's got that hair that reminds me of, and he's roughly the same age as Prince William was when Diana died in 1997. William had just turned 15 that summer, and James will be 15 by the end of the year. And the hair and the age and everything, and of course the downcast look of grief, just everything kind of with James is reminding me of William at that age 25 years ago. So of course we saw William, we saw Harry. You're going to talk about him in a second. We saw Zara and Peter, Anne's children. We saw Louise and James, Edward and Sophie's children. And then we, of course, saw Beatrice and Eugenie as well. So I know we talked last week about the controversy over military uniforms. Tell us that Harry was in uniform. No way anyone could have missed that. So talk to us
Yeah.
about that.
So there was a little controversy over the uniforms, and listeners, you probably remember last episode, we talked about how Harry had released a statement saying that he would be in a morning suit and did not want the focus to be on what he was wearing because whatever he wore really doesn't change the fact that he served in the military. Well, it sounded like to us like a decision had been made at the top, and we just figured he didn't want that to be on everyone's radar or focus. And so anyway, he did end up wearing a uniform at this particular vigil per Charles' request. It seems like there was probably, I'm guessing, so much discussion swirling around Prince Andrew being allowed to wear his uniform at the vigil, and then Harry being told he couldn't wear his uniform. And so, I'm guessing Charles came in and just made an executive decision, like, let's stop the rumors, wear the uniform for the vigil. And so we did, yeah, we saw him there. William was of course in uniform, and Harry as well.
I have to say something about that. And I I understand the sentiment of not having working royals not wear their, I guess I understand that. I mean, whatever, it's the rules, but you can't take someone's military service away from them just because they no longer work for the firm. I don't think that Harry's military service had anything to do with his role as a royal. In fact, he was very adamant when he was serving for that decade that he didn't want to be treated any differently because he was a prince. He wanted to be Harry Wales, not Prince Harry. And I honestly, I I respect the rules and the protocol of the royal family, but I also don't understand how you can tell someone who served in active combat and who had a 10-year military career, no, you can't wear your uniform. And I know, and we're not going to really go too deep into this, but I know I read a lot of reports about how the E2R, like the Elizabeth II Regina, whatever, pendant or pin or whatever, was taken off of his uniform. And I don't know, that the whole military uniform thing does not sit well with me, because that has, again, I don't think, and listeners or you, Jessica, can correct me if you think I'm wrong, but I don't think that his military service really has anything to do with his status as a working member of the royal family. So that being said, I am glad that he was allowed to wear his uniform. He
Yeah,
said,
I
go
mean, I
ahead.
think there are a lot of rules that we probably aren't familiar with over here, so I don't want to get too in the weeds about it. I've thought about this a lot, and I've tried to read on it a little bit, and there's just so many like little things that we don't think about. But I kind of see both sides of it. I think. On on one hand, I get what you're saying. You served in the military, and you can't take that away. On the other hand, some of the medals and stuff that he received, I believe, were honorary because he was a prince. I don't think all of the medals that they've gotten are because of something that they've done, or a duty that they've done to earn them, like someone who wouldn't be a prince maybe would have to do in order to get those medals, or titles that they have. So, I could see how that could come with the territory of being a working royal. But also, you've got Prince Andrew, who, if Harry shouldn't wear his uniform, I have a hard time justifying why he should, except for the fact that, like, he does still live in the UK. He is still, very much actively, there in the country and living on the royal grounds. But it's a really weird situation. So I do think Charles made the right call in the end for saying, if one's going to wear it at the vigil, let's let both of them do that.
Well, and I'm not going to belabor this. I think you always hear you can't take your education away from you. No matter what happens to you, you cannot take your education away from you if you earned a degree. I feel the same way about military service. You cannot take that away from someone. Even Andrew. I'll give it to Andrew too. Andrew served as well. And so all of this to say, I am glad that Charles, I think, made the right call and let Harry wear the uniform that day, even though Harry said that it didn't really matter to him, that it wasn't about him, which I respect. But he did wear the uniform. So there's that. So on Saturday, we had statements coming out from all members of the family. Basically, at this point, we've heard from, I think, everyone, but Beatrice and Eugenie released a statement, and I'm just going to read it in part here. Part of it said, my favorite part of it said, "We've not been able to put much into words since you left us all." Of course, speaking to their grandmother. "There have been tears and laughter, silences and chatter, hugs and loneliness, and a collective loss for you, our beloved queen and our beloved granny. We, like many, thought you'd be here forever, and we all miss you terribly."
Yeah, I thought that was really sweet because we've talked about that before. We did kind of all think that she would be here forever, or at least, we didn't expect her to be gone yet. But we also got a message from Edward and Sophie this past week. So they released a statement, and in there they said, "The Queen's passing has left an unimaginable void in all our lives. Sophie and I have taken huge pleasure in seeing our James and Louise enjoying the places and activity that their grandparents loved so much. Given that my mama let us spend so much time with her, I think she also rather enjoyed watching those passions blossom. Those times together, those happy memories have now become massively precious to each and every one of us." So that was another, personal note with little glimpses into what Her Majesty's relationship was like with her grandchildren.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think Edward and Sophie obviously releasing that statement on behalf of their entire family, Louise and James, and doing the same. We heard from Andrew. He said, "Mummy, your love for a son, your compassion, your confidence, I will treasure forever. I have found your knowledge and wisdom invite with no boundary or containment. I will miss your insights, advice, and humor. As our book of experiences closes, another opens, and I will forever hold you close to my heart with my deepest love and gratitude. And I will tread gladly into the next with you as my guide, which is actually really beautifully said. So, Sunday, we're kind of breezing through this. Obviously, so many moving parts, so much going on. The Queen continues to lay in state at this point at Westminster Hall. So, Charles and Camilla hosted a reception on Sunday evening for world leaders and foreign royals at Buckingham Palace. The reception hosted about 500. And there was, as ever, controversy surrounding Harry and Meghan, who this is, these are just press reports, but they apparently were initially invited to this reception, but then the invite was rescinded. And according to the press, Harry and Meghan did not find out that they were uninvited to the reception until they read about it, just like you and I did in the media. And the reason being that they are not working royals. And, I have to touch on this too. And I don't really want to get too much into the gossip and the innuendo of the week. There's another time and a place for that. But, I was a little bothered if this report is true, which of course I don't know at this point, but that when William, Andrew, Edward, and Sophie flew up on September 8th from London to Scotland to try to get there in time before Her Majesty passed. They didn't make it. They did not make it. Harry was not on that plane. Whether he was not on that plane by his choice or by something else, that's unconfirmed. But they were all coming from the same place. So I don't know why they couldn't unite in that moment. Also, I read reports that Harry wasn't told about Her Majesty's death until about 5 minutes before the world was told. And if that's true, that's also upsetting. Again, I don't have the truth. It's his side, her side, and the truth somewhere in there. But it just seems like there's still, as hopeful as I was with the walkabout at Windsor on Saturday the 10th, there still seems to be lots of tension happening.
Well,
but go ahead.
let me just say, what I've kind of heard and read about that too. I did hear that when they knew the Queen was probably not going to make it when she was not doing well, Charles did call William and Harry before she passed to let them know they needed to get there. And I did hear that he called William first, and I think there was a bit of time before he got a hold of Harry. I don't know if he waited to call him or what happened there. But I think part of the reason that Harry didn't find out about her passing was because he was on the plane, and they were trying to get a hold of him before, to let him know before they released the public statement. So he was there on his way. But I think at that point, so many people pretty much knew the news that was coming. And so I don't know if they, needed to go ahead and get it out, but they didn't want to do it obviously before they told him. But I think that there may have been, some difficulty in getting a hold of him before they
That actually
shared
makes
it
sense
publicly.
because normal protocol is that the BBC reports any kind of death like this. If the death happens in the afternoon or in the morning, the BBC reports the death at 6 p.m. London time. And I remember on that day, on that Thursday, hearing from every source I had that she was dead and waiting with bated breath for 6 p.m., which was noon here.
Mm-hmm.
And then nothing came.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, maybe my intel is bad. And then it ultimately, I think it came out around between 6:30 and 7. I can't really remember. And that would make sense because if they were waiting to get a hold of Harry,
Yeah,
and
I think
again, they
they
couldn't get a
couldn't
hold of him. He
delay
was
it
on
any
the
longer.
plane. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, that makes sense. See, again, there's multiple sides to every headline, right?
So I want to go back really quick to the reception at Buckingham Palace too, and kind of just share what I was reading about that. And of course, we obviously weren't there behind the scenes, so we only know what we read. But this makes sense to me too. From what I've heard, it sounds like they were never supposed to be invited to that event. If they got an invitation, I guess it was an error, and maybe that was where there was some miscommunication. But from what it sounds like, there was never an official, hey, you're invited, hey, we're uninviting you. It was, hey, they received this in error, but no, you were never supposed to be invited. And to me, that checks out, because why would they expect to get an invitation to an event that working royals would be going to? Again, like they're not working royals anymore. They should be included in things with the broader family who are also not working royals, like Zara and other cousins. So I don't know why they would have assumed they would be attending that event. And I don't know it. I don't know that it really checks out that they wouldn't have known until they read it in the press. I don't know, but something about that is a little bit weird in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, who really knows? All we know is what we read, and we can't believe everything we read, says a writer. So anyway, I try to report as factually as I possibly can. But there's always room for error, and there's always multiple sides to every story. So on a positive note, we've been seeing this rainbow theme kind of carry through this whole mourning period. Of course, we saw the double rainbow over Buckingham Palace right before the Queen's death was announced on September 8th. Then flash forward to September 18th, which, by the way, I should point out I just thought of this, was baby Sienna, Beatrice's daughter's first birthday. So what a time to have a birthday, right? But she won't remember it anyway. But I hope they were able to do something good for her, a cake or something small. But anyway, over Westminster, where the Queen was lying in state on Sunday, September 18th, there was a rainbow that appeared again, and the photos are beautiful. And I just think, it's a theme that's carrying through, and I just think it's a beautiful sign of hope and optimism for she's okay, and she's at peace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's been really incredible to see those rainbows kind of pop up this past week. Really, really beautiful. So also on Sunday, Buckingham Palace shared a previously unreleased photo of the Queen, which was taken during the Platinum Jubilee. She is wearing a lovely dress in that same powder blue color that we saw at the Jubilee, and a brooch given to her by her father on her 18th birthday, which I thought went so well with her outfit and her eyes. It really made her eyes pop. It was a great photo. We shared it on our Instagram account. And, we were just talking about jewelry earlier, Warren, this week, and I mentioned the pearls. I noticed that the 3-strand pearls the Queen has on in that photo that they released Sunday was the same necklace that Kate, the Princess of Wales, wore to the reception at the palace that Sunday evening. So I know that was intentional.
Absolutely. Royal women in their fashion choices, nothing is left to chance. And you can't play with colors right now. Everyone's in black, but jewelry has really been the way that a lot of women are sending messages of love and support and gratitude for the Queen. And also on Sunday, we saw photos of Kate meeting with Ukrainian First Lady Olena Zelensky. And we got a second statement from Charles, which said in part, as we all prepare to say our last farewell, I wanted simply to take this opportunity to say thank you to all those countless people who have been such a support and comfort to my family and myself in this time of grief. Of course, this is on the eve of the funeral. So then now that takes us to yesterday, which is Monday.
Yes. And Monday, of course, was the day of the funeral. And I know, Rachel, you said you were up around 3:30 in the morning. I was up at 4. And it was a busy day, and I was really quite surprised at the end of the day. I was not totally exhausted. I thought I would be, but I did have coffee to keep me going all day. So but there was a lot going on Monday.
Yeah, I was really keyed up as well. I couldn't, I wanted to go to sleep around 7 or 8 last night, but I couldn't. I was actually up until about 1 o'clock in the morning. And I just think, I was just riding on adrenaline from reporting on such a monumental event. And I'm sure many of, if not all of our listeners have watched the funeral. Maybe you didn't watch it live, but I would very much encourage you to, if nothing else, watch the 1 hour funeral. I'm positive it's on YouTube. I watched it live, but at some point when all the dust settles, I'm going to go back and watch it in full when I'm not reporting on it, so I can fully take it in. The music, the atmosphere, everything. Even, I mean, this is neither here nor there, but the fashion. I mean, I just love every detail of it. And over 2,000 people were at the funeral at Westminster Abbey on Monday morning, including royals from around the world, many of whom we talk about on the show. We saw Monaco, Sweden. I mean, really, just everyone was there. Angela Kelly was there. We talked about Angela Kelly, the Queen's dresser and friend. Charles Spencer was there, Diana's younger brother. Sandra Oh from Grey's Anatomy was there as a part of the Canadian delegation. So it was just the people watching was fantastic. But obviously the ceremony and the Bible verses and the hymns and just everything that was said, there was so much said that day that the Queen actually said that we will meet again, which of course she said during the pandemic. And it's so interesting, like in Harry's statement about his grandmother, how and William's as well, actually, how they're quoting her had to help them deal with their grief. Usually in the context of Philip's death, the Queen said so much about grief when she was in her own mourning period, and now her own words are comforting those that are mourning her.
Yeah. We also saw the Princess of Wales parents, Carole and Michael Middleton, at the funeral
Mhm.
as well. I saw some photos of them.
Yeah. And the coffin moved at 10:35 a.m. The service was at 11, 10:35 from Westminster Hall, where of course it had laid in state since Wednesday, to Westminster Abbey. And just so much praise for those who were transporting her coffin, who were processing behind. It's just so the military precision, like everything was so on time. It was just so exact, and just so much respect for all of the people who obviously worked so hard and walked so many miles for that matter to make that happen. And the service began at 11 a.m. It concluded at noon with a 2-minute silence observed across the UK and in my bedroom in Birmingham, Alabama.
Mhm.
And the Queen was buried at St. George's Chapel at Windsor. There was a committal service that hosted 800, so it was a bit smaller. It was still big, but and that was at St. George's, where of course Harry and Meghan got married. Of course William and Kate got married at the Abbey. So it's, these venues have their high points and their low points. And the committal service it did have a more intimate feel than the funeral. And then there was a little break, about a 2.5 hour break, and then there was a quiet reception during that time. And then she was privately interred with just the family. And we didn't see any of that, but we did get that beautiful Instagram post from the royal family of the Queen in 1971 in the mountains of Scotland, and just confirming that she had been laid to rest. And George and Charlotte were there. We didn't know during our last episode that was a possibility. I started hearing that George might be there on Sunday, and then George and Charlotte were there, and we did get confirmation through the program. I don't know where it is at this point, but the order of service is out there, so you can find that and print that if you want to keep that as a keepsake. But George, Charlotte, and Louis are all now George Wales, Charlotte Wales, Louis Wales. That was confirmed. And they walked behind the Queen's coffin at the funeral. Louis, who is only 4, God love him, was deemed too young to participate. He is. I wrote a story about this yesterday, having trouble, and not surprisingly, understanding his great grandmother's death. He said something so sweet about, well, will we still be able to go and play at Balmoral now that she's gone? And just you have to remember that she's a queen, but she's still a great grandmother. And of course, we mentioned earlier in the show that Charlotte wept at one point. She was wearing her first hat. It was Charlotte's first hat moment. And I thought she looked beautiful. She also wore a horseshoe brooch, which was a gift from the queen. And I call these moments Charlotte in charge moments because she is a boss, man. Like she might not be the heir to the throne, but she is the boss of that family for sure. And at one point, cameras caught her looking at older brother George, and as the coffin went by, and she said, you need to bow. And so he did. She is the boss of this family, and I love this child. Like I love watching her grow up. All of them,
Yeah,
but especially her.
I saw that, and I thought the children did very well. I
Yeah, they were wonderful.
loved Charlotte's little hat, and, I thought her outfit was sort of like a little coat dress. It kind of matched the
Yes,
Princess of
yes, like
Wales.
Kate. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it was really, nice, and nice that they were able to be there in attendance with the family.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Charlotte's coming to all these things. Like, of course, she went to Philip's memorial back in March, which seems like a lifetime ago. But and then so much of the Platinum Jubilee with George, and I like that because that means that George doesn't have to be alone.
Mhm.
And so they're tag teaming it. But Charles was spotted, of course, getting visibly emotional, especially during the national anthem. So I mean, I've always said this about the royal family. What a cruel trick that the moment you've waited for your entire life hinges on the death of a beloved parent. That's just so tough. And as I mentioned before, Kate was wearing a pearl choker. She wore that. There was a rewear from Philip's funeral, and then it was the Queen's originally. Meghan was seen wiping away tears. She continued to wear those pearl earrings that were gifted to her from the Queen in 2018. Meghan was in it. Doesn't, I write for what Meghan wore, and we're not really doing fashion IDs, but I can tell you that her dress was Stella McCartney. It was a caped look, and this version she wore yesterday was the black version of the same blue cape dress, navy cape dress that she wore to the Queen's birthday celebration back in 2018. So the Queen's birthday is in April, and Meghan was just a couple of weeks at this point away from marrying Harry. So I thought that was a sweet nod back to the Queen and back to a obviously much happier occasion.
Yeah. And for the actual funeral, Harry was not in military uniform like he was at the vigil. He did not take any salutes per the rule, again, that, only working royals could do that.
And Sophie at one point was seen passing a handkerchief to Edward. It was just an emotional
Mm.
day all the way around. And I just continue to be so moved by how much symbolism there was, how much thoughtfulness and meaning and tradition in everything. I just continue to be comforted by the fact that Her Majesty had a hand in planning all of this. And one of the most powerful moments for me was at the committal service at St. George's Chapel when the imperial state crown was removed, the scepter was removed, the orb was removed from the top of the Queen's coffin to bury her. And I'm getting goosebumps as I say this, just as a simple Christian woman, because you know what, at the end of the day, we're all, no matter if we're rich or poor, successful, not successful, whatever, we all come, again, not to get too preachy, but come to the gates of heaven just as people.
Mhm.
And so she was buried as a simple Christian woman, just like you and just like me. And I also loved the symbolic breaking of the wand of office, to show that the work was done, and it was over. And I just, going when the coffin was going to Windsor, I mean, who in this world cannot get emotional at seeing Princess Charlotte cry, or when the coffin passes the Queen's favorite horse, Emma, who was draped in Her Majesty's scarf. And then, oh my gosh, the kicker. There's the pups, there's the corgis, sitting out there waiting for one last glimpse of their owner as
I
she
know.
passes.
I saw those photos, and this was a truly personal touch in the day. We talked about all the little personal touches. It was really sad to see. I know we get so attached to our pets, and even though they aren't human, you have a special bond with a dog, and maybe even a horse. And I've talked about my dog a lot on our podcast. And I know the Queen loved her corgis. And I don't know if our listeners saw a reel that we posted on our Instagram, but I went through Instagram and gathered a lot of like a collection of all of these photos of Her Majesty throughout the years with her dogs, and kind of put them together to the song from the Toy Story movie, You've Got a Friend in Me. Um,
Mm.
and I really, I thought it was kind of sweet, but I played it back, and I got a little emotional. And one of our listeners, Linda, messaged me and she said it made her cry. And I told her, me too. I got emotional seeing it. So,
You're doing great work on Instagram, by the way. You are absolutely killing it. So thank you for all of that, because that's all you.
well, we go through days where we don't post as much, but I've been trying to keep up over there, because I know everyone that listens to the podcast, they tune in to kind of see what updates we've got. But also wanted to mention there was a note on top of the coffin from Charles. It read, "In loving and devoted memory, Charles R." So R is Latin for Rex, which is king, as opposed to Regina, which is queen. So, I'm sure everyone has seen Her Majesty sign her letters and notes as Elizabeth R, or you've seen her initials as ER2. And if you've ever wondered why it was R and not W for Windsor, that is why, because it's the initial for queen. And of course, Charles will use it now for king.
And it's a royal tradition to put notes on top, and not just royal. I mean, other people do this too, but especially royals put notes on top of the coffin. If you'll remember from Philip's funeral in April of 2021, it was signed "Your loving Lilibet," of course, being the Queen's familial nickname that Philip also called her. And then who can ever forget the mummy on Diana's coffin in 1997, which was written by Harry, who was only 12 at the time. William and Kate also wrote notes. And I want to talk for a minute about the flowers that were on top of the coffin. Absolutely beautiful. They, again, so much meaning, so much thoughtfulness put into every detail. They featured myrtle that was from the Queen's wedding in 1947. How beautiful is that? And at Charles's request, the wreath contained foliage of rosemary, English oak, and myrtle, which, like I said, was cut from a plant that was grown from myrtle in the Queen's wedding bouquet. The flowers were in shades of gold, pink, and deep burgundy, with some touches of white, and they were cut from the gardens of royal residences. This is according to a tweet from Buckingham Palace. Every aspect of the bouquet was chosen with a purpose. The rosemary represents remembrance. The English oak symbolizes the strength of love. And the myrtle represents a happy marriage, which, of course, Elizabeth enjoyed a happy marriage for over 70 years. And the floral arrangement contains sweet peas, which was a favorite of Her Majesty's, and the flower of her birth month, which is April. And it was also included dahlias, roses, autumnal hydrangeas, sedum, which I hope I'm saying correctly, scabious, and scented pella. Okay, if y'all are flower
They're
people,
getting
you're gonna
harder.
I know. If y'all are flower people, you're gonna judge me if I mispronounce this. Pelargoniums. Someone is cringing out there. But anyway, the point being that everything was just chosen and planned with such purpose. And I didn't catch this because I was actually writing at the time. So at a certain point, I was listening, but I wasn't really watching. I missed that there was a spider crawling across the top of the coffin, which apparently symbolizes good luck. So the spider was, I'm sure, from the flowers that were there. And
Oh,
did you catch that?
no, I missed that too.
Yeah, I missed it, but it was all over the news. So apparently it symbolizes good luck. So I didn't know that. Maybe if I see a spider, I'll be a little bit more welcoming, but I've never been welcoming when I see a spider. But you mentioned the power of the hymns at the service. There were among the three hymns that were recited at the Monday service was "The Lord's My Shepherd," which was also sung at her 1947 wedding ceremony to Philip at the same location at the Abbey. There was, as I said, after she was buried, there was a really beautiful photo of her in the mountains, from the 70s to confirm that she had been laid to rest. And I thought this fact was interesting. The Duke of Kent, who is the Queen's cousin, you might remember him from, he made one of the balcony appearances with the Queen back in June for the Platinum Jubilee. He was the only person to walk behind both Queen Elizabeth II and King George VI in their funeral procession. So imagine living such a life that you can do both of those things. So he walked behind his beloved cousin. They were very close.
So now that the funeral, of course, has wrapped up and we've moved on to Tuesday, which is the day we're recording, Camilla and Charles flew to Scotland today, which is where they will continue to remain as they finish out their mourning period. The royals are in a 7-day mourning period until September 26th. And I also read today that Harry and Meghan left the UK to go back to California on Monday following the funeral. We know they've been away from their children for a really long time now, so I'm sure that they were eager to get back home and see them.
I thought that they were staying through the mourning period, but I guess
So,
go ahead.
If I'm wrong about that, someone correct me, but I've been reading that they left pretty quickly Monday. So, I mean, we'll check that again and we'll correct it on our next episode if we got that wrong. But I read it
I don't know.
in 2 different places.
If they didn't fly out Archie and Lily, I don't blame them a bit for going home, because they've been gone since September 3rd and they only plan to be gone until September 8th, I think.
And the kids are really young.
Yeah, so I don't blame them at all, and I don't think anybody would fault them for that. Okay, well, you and I are both exhausted. It is Tuesday night. I know I'm not caught up in my sleep, but I think that is the gist of just this really emotional past week. And I mean, I feel like we ran down everything, but I want to close by just saying how powerful it all was, how just I feel honored to be alive, let alone reporting on the royals, to see this part of history. And I don't think it's an 11 days that any of us who loved Her Majesty will ever forget. And now it's time to start the next chapter of our royal reporting and the reign of King Charles III. And I just again want to say thank you, ma'am, for everything, to quote Paddington Bear. And it was a beautiful tribute to a beautiful woman.
Yes, absolutely.
Anything else you'd like to add before we close?
I just feel the same way. I think you summed it up very well. We've been guests on other podcasts before. I know you write a lot, and of course, we're out there on our Instagram account. And this was the first time these past few weeks that I've been able to go live and report on television, and it was a great experience, but also, really sad. And I also felt really fortunate to be able to be a part of that in some way. And it's been really special as we have talked about this, to be able to share our takeaways from this event for our listeners. So to our listeners, if you guys have anything special that sticks out to you that you want to share with us, let us know. Send us an email or a DM, and and we'll share your takeaways on the podcast as well.
Yes. And listeners, we hope you're doing okay. We hope you're doing well. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the funeral. We'll probably come back in our next episode, maybe a little bit more clear-headed and rested, and reflect on it even more, because it's just only been about 24, 36 hours since it happened. So we're still processing everything, but thank you, listeners, as always, for being with us on this journey. Please follow us on Instagram at Podcast Royal. Like I said, Jessica is doing some great content that you don't want to miss. I take no credit for that. Please email us at hellopodcastroyal@gmail.com if you want to chat about anything. You can also DM us, and follow, rate, and review the show. We really appreciate those 5-star ratings, and just appreciate all of you listening and all of us being in this together. That's episode 71 of Podcast Royal. We'll be back with episode 72 and starting a new chapter. And again, rest in peace, Your Majesty, and thank you for everything.